Welcome back. Saturday night is power rankings time. So, yeah, all 32 teams, 1 through 32. I'm not using the puck board. I don't have the room in here. This, of course, on the makeshift set that I'm using during the cold snap. I'm hoping to be back on the main set tomorrow. It's a matter of if it's that cold outside, the amount of energy and time it takes to warm up the set, it's just not worth it. It's better off just to lock that part of the house off, and then it gives our furnace a bit of a break too. Anyways, all that being said, all that aside, I'm sure people will totally understand why I can't use the puck board tonight, right? No? All right, well, we'll do this anyways. All right, number 32 this week, and the same as last week, nice and simple, San Jose Sharks. The San Jose Sharks won their first game in a while. They then followed that up with a loss tonight. I'm glad that the Ottawa Center that the Sens beat them. I'm glad that they did get their 10th win as well, and yeah, all is pretty much as it was last week. Number 31, also in the same spot as last week, the Chicago Blackhawks. For Chicago, they're competitive without Bedard, but they're not winning very much without Bedard. They weren't winning very much with him either. But it really feels like in their games now, they're just trying to shut down any chance for anybody at all times, and it's working pretty well. So if they can keep that up when Bedard comes back, who knows? They might start winning some games. Number 30, also the same spot as last week, Anaheim. The Anaheim Ducks, and so these three teams all stay in the same spot. The Ducks tonight against Tampa Bay. It was a good first period. They seem to be able to have good starts to games. They're not putting together the full 60 minutes. It has to be driving the coach and the GM absolutely bonkers. But at the same time, the Ducks have been out of the race for the playoffs for well over a month now. So 30th, that is where they reside. Number 29, dropping one spot from last week, Columbus. So again, we're not into controversial territory yet. Columbus Blue Jackets being 29th. I don't think there'll be any ruffled feathers. Unless there's birds watching. Why would birds be watching? Why would you suggest such a thing? But for Columbus, again, they're into playing for next year and all of that fun stuff. There is, of course, as I say every week, there are reasons to be optimistic for next year. But this year's probably gone. Of course, this week too, the news that Elvis is on the trade block, and yet at the same time they're like, well, no, not necessarily. He just needs a new situation. So they're going to move him into a new apartment. Like, what else? What else is there? Obviously, they're going to end up moving him, or at least trying. It's going to be hard to move that contract. That being said, hey, LA moved Cal Peterson's contract. So do you do Elvis for Jack Campbell, or how does that? Anyway. Again, we'll see what ends up happening there. Number 28, moving up one spot from last week, Ottawa. And if you're figuring out that they're not matching in size, you're right. They don't match in size. I did my best, but I wanted to have fun with it. For Ottawa, they move up one spot. I mean, they had a 5-game losing streak on that road trip. They came home, they won a game. Again, in this area of the board, moving up, moving down. Moving down's difficult. Moving up is relatively easy. A 2-game winning streak would do it. Even for San Jose, if they won 2 games in a row this week, they would probably jump past Chicago at the very least. Number 27, same spot as last week, Buffalo. Buffalo has got a couple of wins, right? And then they committed today and they lost 1-0 against Vancouver. Now, they played well in that game against Vancouver. And I think there are some encouraging signs for Buffalo. The problem is, it's how far back from the playoffs they are, how many teams they have to jump over to get there, the kind of record they'll have to put up if they want to make the playoffs. It all becomes very daunting. So for Buffalo, bottom row, all of these teams in my mind are basically done. No playoffs for these teams. I want to be wrong with Buffalo. I absolutely 100% want to be wrong with Buffalo, but at this point, they're 27th. Number 26, dropping 2 spots from last week, Minnesota. So Minnesota is now in the bottom row. For the Minnesota Wild, it has been a pretty rough season. And I know I'm understating it by saying it's been a pretty rough season, but for the Wild, they got Kaprizov back tonight. They got back Gustafsson, and they lost 6-0 against the Arizona Coyotes. So I don't know. I don't know how much positivity I can throw into this for the Minnesota Wild. I want to. Remember, my wife, one of her favorite teams is the Minnesota Wild. I want to see them do well. I'm starting to think they might not make the playoffs, though. Number 25, moving up one spot from last week, Montreal. And that's why I was moving the logos over, because I was like, I don't know if I got enough room for Montreal. I did, but I wanted to make sure. So Montreal moves up one spot from last week. They're competitive. They lost the game against San Jose this week. So the fact that they move up a spot when they lost to San Jose, I want to say that's a first on the power rankings this year. Like, I haven't been moving teams up when they beat San Jose or they beat Anaheim. But if a team loses against San Jose or Anaheim, they immediately drop. And yet for Montreal in this row, I still end up moving them up. I thought they had a good game tonight against Edmonton. So nice bounce back game. And for Minnesota, it's been a nightmare. So I felt like Montreal should be ahead of Minnesota. Let me know your thoughts. So that's the bottom row. Again, that's where the least amount of issues come up with the comment section. Number 24, dropping one spot from last week, is Calgary. Now, I'm aware Calgary's been playing better lately. The thing is, this is argument row. Like, from 24 to 17, this is usually where the arguments will come in with the power rankings. Calgary, the odds of them making the playoffs are still not fantastic. They've played more games than some of the teams they're chasing. You've got Nashville and Edmonton putting up good records. The team they may have to chase down for a playoff spot could end up being LA, but then you have to worry about Seattle too. So hopefully the second half of the season we see an amazing race to the, well, not the amazing race, but a really nice race to the finish in the West, unlike last year where Calgary and Winnipeg, neither of them seemed to want that last playoff spot. It's kind of like, nah, you take it. And then the other team would lose. No, we want you to take it. So hopefully that doesn't happen this year. But Calgary's in the mix. Number 23, moving up 2 spots from last week, Detroit. They're in the mix in the East. And again, it's argument row. And when if you go and you look at the standings and you see how close all these teams are to each other, this is why I just update the power rankings every night. And I try to stay away from the standings. We are getting into the second half of the season, so I become more and more of a follower of the standings because I'm curious to see who would play who if the playoffs started today, kind of thing. But yeah, Detroit's in the mix. They had the 5-1 lead against LA. They didn't have a great third period, but they got the win. LA is a team that's really fallen lately, but Detroit swept the season series against them, so good on them. Number 22, same spot as last week for Arizona. The Coyotes, they get the win over Boston, right? They get the win over Minnesota. Again, they're going to have to get some of those teams that they're chasing to slow down a little bit. Because, again, in the West, it feels like teams want those playoff spots now. But the Coyotes are right there. I love Connor Ingram's work. I think he's having an amazing season. As I mentioned in a video earlier today, I'm going to be interested to see if he can do it over a full 82-game schedule. Connor Ingram's never been a starter in the NHL, and I'm here for it. With everything he's been through in his lifetime, I'm here for it. I hope he has an amazing run, and maybe Arizona gets into the playoffs. Number 21, same spot as last week, St. Louis. So St. Louis beats the Rangers. They go into overtime against Boston tonight. And again, I do expect this to be argument row. But again, for St. Louis, they're just a little bit below the playoff line. It is very, very clogged around that playoff line in the West. I know St. Louis is playing well. I didn't see anybody that I felt I was ready to move them beyond. Because if a team's going to move up, that means another team's going to move back. If that team's going to move back, you have to have a reason why that team's going to move back as well. Which brings us to number 20, dropping 2 spots from last week, Pittsburgh. So they take Carolina to overtime, they take Vancouver to overtime. Both Vancouver and Carolina are in the top row this week. So there's that, but they didn't win those games either. So for Pittsburgh, they drop. I felt like there were a couple of teams that, bumped up past them. The Pittsburgh Penguins are going to be in a very interesting spot come trade deadline because there's a lot of talk about Jay Gensel in this market. I don't see him as a Canuck. I know the Rutherford connection, just the idea of the Pittsburgh Penguins trading Gensel to me is it just seems so crazy because they're not out of the hunt for a playoff spot. And I think if you're going to try to trade Jake Gensel, you kind of got to go through Crosby, I would think, first, because if Pittsburgh's going to make some major change to their lineup, I would think they're going to talk to the guys that, the veterans that have signed on for long-term extensions and explain, here's the plan, and we're going to trade Jake. We'll see what happens in Pittsburgh, but it's going to be fascinating in the second half of the season. I don't know how many sellers there are going to be honest, at the deadline. There may not be very many. Number 19, moving up 1 spot from last week, the Washington Capitals. So the Capitals move up the one spot. They do get the win over the Rangers. I thought it was interesting. I lost count of how many times they talked about the fact that Washington's very good in one goal games, but if a game is decided by 3 or more goals, they lose. And that's basically just the rule. Because Washington's style of game is to just basically take the energy out of it, trap the game, don't let a lot of shots take place on your net, and don't worry about the shots at the other end either. And it's this weird setup that just works. Boston plays a similar style to that. There are other teams that play that style as well. Arizona can play that way too. The Islanders can play that way, and when those teams play against one another, you can get some slow games. You might have like the game itself might go quickly with very few whistles, but there may not be a lot of action. And Washington excels in games where it's 2-1 or 3-2. As soon as it's a wide open talent, everything that kind of thing, the Capitals just aren't able to keep up with that now. But they're playing well enough to stay in the hunt. Number 18, dropping 3 spots from last week, New York Islanders. The Islanders haven't been in the argument row for a while. But they're down right now, and for the Islanders, it's just they haven't been winning often enough to move up the board. And now some of these losses, they're moving down. Tonight against Nashville, they get the lead in the third. They can't hold it. I know Nashville's been playing better over the last little while here, but again, for the Islanders, with the East being as crazy as it is, the Islanders have to be really careful because they could easily find themselves on the outside of the playoffs come playoff time. Number 17, moving up 2 spots from last week, Tampa Bay. The Tampa Bay Lightning are playing some good hockey right now. Tonight against Anaheim, they did what you do against Anaheim. They won. And I mean, since their 9-6 start, Anaheim's only won 5 games. So for Tampa Bay, it really has been a matter of Vasilevsky's getting his game together. Hedman's playing really well lately. And it just feels like Tampa Bay is starting to click. So Tampa Bay was having a hard time of it. They're starting to click. It's a modest move for them this week. But would I be surprised if they're in the top half of the board next week? Nah, not really. Number 16, dropping 2 spots from last week, Nashville. It's just a matter of Nashville getting past. Nashville did get the win over Dallas. Then they get the win over the Islanders tonight. They still look like a playoff team, thus the top half of the board. For the Nashville Predators, I've been impressed as well with the fact that last night they won with Lankin and tonight with Saros. Saros' numbers good against the Islanders, and so we'll see with Nashville if they can hold a playoff spot because, of course, Seattle's charging. Edmonton's in a playoff spot right now. There's only so many spots to go around. Nashville was in that Turtle Derby last year. That's right. Thinking it's Calgary and it was Winnipeg, and there's Nashville. And the 3 of them were fighting it out about who gets destroyed by Vegas in the first round. And Winnipeg won that honor. So, anyways, Nashville 16th this week. Number 15, dropping 5 spots from last week. Vegas. Yeah, Vegas Golden Knights. So, I don't get to use this very much. And I'm using this magnet because they wore those jerseys tonight. Now, in the games they've worn those jerseys, they've now lost by a combined score of 6-1. They've lost both games. I don't know if we're going to see those jerseys again this year. It feels like something that a superstitious man might say, I don't think we want to wear those for a while. But at any rate, Vegas is in trouble. Now they're without Eichel. Hill was supposed to come back and then he didn't. There's a lot of uncertainty about when Hill's coming back. And of course they're without Shea Theodore. I talked about that earlier today too. So Vegas is missing some really key pieces to their team, and it's caused them to kind of go into a tailspin. They've won, I think it's 4 of their last 12. So, and they've lost the 8 in regulation. I don't think they've had an overtime loss in there either. So for Vegas, it's a tough time right now, and the Oilers are charging. So somebody in that top 3 in the Pacific could end up being a victim of the Edmonton Oilers rapidly charging up the standings. Number 14, moving up 2 spots from last week, New Jersey. The Devils tonight ended that winning streak that the Florida Panthers had been on, and they looked great. Like, the forechecking was so impressive. Obviously, there were 12 games going on by the time you get to the third period of that game, so I watched what I could of it, but I was very impressed by New Jersey, especially in the third period where Florida usually gets that big comeback, and New Jersey's a team that has had a hard time playing 60 minutes. Well, New Jersey, pretty sure Jack Hughes is still out, and they played pretty well without Jack Hughes. So, yeah, New Jersey, I think, is still, I think, going to be a playoff team. They were my pick before the season started for a Stanley Cup. and I don't change my pick until we get to the start of the playoffs, because otherwise you end up in a situation where I might be changing my pick every few weeks, and what's the point? So I no, you stay with one prediction at the start of the year and you stay with it. My prediction was New Jersey over Dallas. Stop laughing. Number 13, moving up 4 spots from last week, is Seattle. So this is where Nashville drops 2 spots, not because Nashville's playing poorly, because Seattle's on a tear, and New Jersey playing better. They're above the playoff line in the East. So this is where the power rankings, there's times where people get mad at me because they think a team dropped because I don't think they played well. It may just be that I think a team's a little bit better than they are right now. And that's where we're at right now with Seattle. Seattle has really got their game going. Columbus, early on in that game, it looked like they were going to, potentially stay in it and maybe win it, and then Seattle just took over. Very impressive wins for Seattle recently, and just how they're winning them and how many different heroes they've had from night to night. So if we get to a 10-game winning streak for Seattle, I'll throw on my Kraken jacket, because I've got a jacket, of course, for Seattle, and we'll have a little chat about Seattle at 10 wins. I think it would be fascinating to look at just how many different heroes there have been during this 10-game winning streak. All right, moving on to number 12. Same spot as last week, Dallas. So Ottinger comes back now in tonight's game. Wedgwood goes out, Ottinger comes in. Hope Wedgwood's okay, but all the goaltenders seem to be getting hurt right now. For everybody, not just for Dallas. But Dallas is in a pretty good spot considering they're without Miro Heiskanen. Ottinger's back now, and Sagan's really picked up his production lately. This is a team that's going to be really dangerous second half of the season, and I don't feel like they're playing their A game yet. So for Dallas, that's why they're 12th. I don't feel like the A game's there, but when it is, they could be a top 5 team in the NHL. I don't see them being there right now, but yeah, I'm happy with them in 12th. That's about right. They lose the game against Nashville. They beat Chicago. 12th is about right for them right now. We'll see if they stay there in the coming weeks. I hope so. I genuinely do. Number 11, or move up. Number 11, and dropping, I think it's the most a team's dropped this week. Yep, they're tied with Vegas. Dropping 5 spots from last week, the LA Kings. So the LA Kings, and it feels like I actually considered a market correction for the Kings today. I didn't. But we're close. Market correction means that I just go, you know what? This team is in the wrong spot. And I can move a team up 4 or 5 spots or drop a team 4 or 5 spots because I'm like, that's enough of that. And with the Kings, I'm getting close. I'm getting very close to just taking the Kings and plunking them right about here on the board. That early start and that great road record they had, not sustainable. And it really feels like the Kings peaked too soon in the season. Which is bad news. The Pacific Division is really competitive right now, and the Kings, if they don't get this together, within a few weeks, we could be talking about them being on the outside looking in at the playoffs. Look at the standings; they're not that far ahead of that playoff line anymore, and it just feels like it's a slippery slope, and it's just started going the wrong way for them. Number 10, dropping 2 spots from last week, but they got better at the end of the week, obviously with the win against Winnipeg. They were actually 12th a few days ago on this board, and they moved back up to 10th. So I think Philadelphia is better than anybody expected them to be. And I think that while they had a downswing recently and they went through a 10-game period where they only won 3, I think they've now won 2 in a row again. I feel like they're ready to start going in the right direction. Philadelphia's 3rd in that division. That spot's theirs if they want it. There isn't anybody else right now that looks like they could charge up to 3rd in the division other than maybe New Jersey. But even New Jersey still has their issues. And yeah, Philadelphia. Why not Philadelphia? Right? Why not the Flyers? Number 9, moving up 2 spots from last week, Toronto. So the Toronto Maple Leafs move up in part because the Kings and the Flyers move down. So the Kings and the Flyers drop. Toronto moves up to 9th. The 3-0 lead against Colorado, the fact that they blew that 3-0 lead, I did not penalize them for that, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. The reason being that Colorado is one of the best teams in the league. So I don't think that necessarily means Toronto's in the wrong spot. I think that just tells you how good Colorado is, and the power rankings this week do reflect how good Colorado is. But yeah, Toronto's 9th. They're not in the top row. They do move up a couple of spots this week, and we'll see where they are next week. But A top 10 team, yes, but not top 8 in my eyes, at least at this point. Number 8, moving up 5 spots from last week. Well, I mean, I'm wearing an Oilers jersey, so there has to be a reason I'm wearing an Oilers jersey, and it's because they're 8th on the board this week. So I know that there's a lot of power rankings, NHL related, that have had the Oilers much higher than I have. I just felt like the gradual climb is there. And one thing I always tell people is if a team is playing well, with the way that I do this in the gradual climb, eventually they will reach the top if they keep playing that way. And the Oilers have continued to play really well. It's a ridiculous amount of wins they have. They are now staring down third place. I think they're going to catch LA and pass them. And not only that, but with the way Vegas has been playing, I think they're going to catch and pass Vegas as well. And then it's a matter of, can they catch Vancouver? Well, Vancouver has to stop winning first for them to catch Vancouver, which this week didn't really happen. So the Oilers move up 5 spots. They're the biggest mover this week, so that's why I'm wearing the Oilers jersey and all that. My Gretzky 99 here. But yeah, so Edmonton Oilers move up to 8th. They're in the top row. Pretty sure they started there before the season started, and then it just kind of all fell apart. So when I get up to the All-Star break and when we go on vacation, the power rankings I'm going to do that week is going to be a look at. I want to look at where teams started on the power rankings in week 0 and where they are now. And I also want to do like an average and just kind of look at an average of where teams are at and all that. So look forward to that a couple weeks from now. Number 7, moving up 2 spots from last week, Boston. So Boston's an interesting case because basically LA drops. Vegas has, of course, dropped. Philadelphia drops a couple of spots. Boston moves up. Boston's had... Their run is really hard to describe. This week they went to overtime in all 4 games. They won once out of those 4 games. They lost in a shootout once. They lost in overtime twice. All of them on the road. So Boston's played a lot of hockey. But they're still getting points, and I felt like they did show themselves better than some of the other teams on the board. So Boston's back in the top row during their centennial season, so I felt like I should use the centennial magnet. I have a lot of throwback Boston logo magnets, and I wanted to use the centennial one today. So there you go. Number 6 on the board, dropping 3 spots from last week, the New York Rangers. The Rangers are definitely a troubled team right now. So I talked about the LA Kings. Now it looks like they peaked early. I'm starting to think the same of the Rangers. They were just out of sorts today. They just didn't have it. And there's been a few games lately where the Rangers just, it's not there. And, it's that quality in when you're watching a game of a team that you're like, this team, they've got it. It's in the bag. It's done. And I haven't had that feeling with the Rangers for a while now, where any game I'm like, maybe. I mean, there could be a comeback the other way. But for the Rangers, they've now lost 4 in a row. It's the first time this season that's happened. And we'll see if they turn this around or what the Rangers do. Does it take a trade? Does it mean a shakeup of the lines? Do you have a couple of bag skates? This kind of thing. Like, we'll see what the Rangers do. But there's definitely some concern with the Rangers because the team that's right behind them is in the same spot on the power rankings they were last week, and that's Carolina. So what's interesting is the Canes stay in the same spot, but they pass the Rangers at the same time because the Rangers are now 6th on the board. Carolina's playing well. If you're top 5 on the board, you have to be playing well. And yeah, Carolina is a team that I don't think I would want to see in the first round of the playoffs right now. They're playing really, really well. And Antti Raanta tonight played the best game he's played all season. So Carolina seems to have gotten past those rough road trips, as I figured they would. I figured there was a lot of panic for nothing. And they don't have to do those road trips again. Number 4, moving up 3 spots from last week, Colorado. Pretty good week for the Colorado Avalanche, and I'm honestly a little bit concerned. I'm starting to think that when we get to playoff time, Colorado might be my pick for the Cup once we get to the playoffs because, they look pretty good. That McKinnon guy's not bad. Makar's pretty good. The only concern I have with Colorado is Georgiev. There's some inconsistency in Georgiev's game, and I do wonder, is he a Stanley Cup goaltender? But last year it was Aiden Hill, and nobody saw that coming. So maybe I'm overthinking it just a little bit. But yeah, Colorado moves up to 4th. Number 3 on the board, dropping 1 spot from last week, Florida. Isn't that brutal? Nice long road trip. They lose a game. This guy bumps them down a spot. Just awful. They were second coming into today. They end up dropping to third. The loss at home against New Jersey, nothing to be concerned about. They've won 9 of their last 10, but they dropped the 1 spot on this week's power rankings. But the Florida Panthers, also a team that I don't know that I'd want to face in the first round this year. And as a Bruins fan, I remember the first round last year. Yeah, no thanks. Number 2, dropping 1 spot from last week. Winnipeg Jets. I had to break this one to Yvonne before I went live with this video. That the Jets dropped 1 spot. They only lost 1 game too. So there are some teams playing really, really well right now in the NHL. And they're bunching up around the top of the power rankings. And the Oilers are getting set to join them atop the power rankings. So the Winnipeg Jets, that's the second team in the top row that's Canadian. Winnipeg just, it was Ersson stealing a game tonight. I feel like it was Ersson stealing a game. But there were points during the game too where the Jets were kind of flat. And so they dropped to number 2 on the power rankings, which means for the first time, I don't think this has ever happened. Ever. The Vancouver Canucks are number 1 on the power rankings. They move up 3 spots from last week. They lose that game in St. Louis. They go out east. They beat New Jersey. They beat the Rangers. They beat the Islanders. They beat Buffalo. I'm even losing track of all the wins. Like, and there's another win. Like, this is not a thing. Vancouver doesn't go east and play really Pittsburgh. I forgot the Pittsburgh win. How do I forget the Pittsburgh win? Because there's been so much winning. So, I mean, the only thing with it is that Lafferty breaks that record game-winning goal streak that Pettersson had going on, but Lafferty was the only goal they needed today. The All-Star vote, I may have had a heads up on that. But yeah, the All-Star vote, it's all Canucks. They all got in. Just showing that Canuck fans know how to spam. That's great. But they do belong there. I don't think the argument can be made that they don't belong there. I think that the Vancouver Canucks are right now playing the best hockey in the NHL. So there you go. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. And again, I'm pretty sure this is the first time in the 6 years I've been doing power rankings. I want to say, well, almost like seventh year. Because I was doing power rankings before the Vegas Golden Knights were in the NHL. Because I remember it used to be 1 to 30, and then Vegas came in and made it 31, now it's 32. So I'm pretty sure Vancouver's never been number 1. They might have been top 10 during the 2019-2020 season at stages, but pretty sure they were never number 1. So this has been a bizarre season. The Kings have been number 1. The Rangers have been number 1. Winnipeg, Colorado. It's almost as if this year the Stanley Cup really looks completely wide open. So maybe we'll get a surprise champion. I say that, and then that's not too long after saying I'm probably going to pick Colorado before the playoffs if things keep trending this direction. So there you go. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always, and I know you will. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And again, by next Saturday, I'll definitely be back on the main set. But for tonight, due to the cold snap that we've been going through, I'm in here. And that's the plan probably for tomorrow as well. I thought I might be back on the main set tomorrow. I'm going to try it in the morning, but don't be surprised if I'm still in here. All right. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. And hey, hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Greatly appreciate doing this for you guys every Saturday night. And I'll be doing this again for you next Saturday night too. Take care.